welcome to the Self-Storage Made Simple podcast. I'm your host, Thaddeus Campbell. Every once in a while, I bring someone in who is completely outside the realm of self-storage. In this case, completely outside the realm of real estate specifically, although tangentially involved in real estate. But so important. I got to meet Joey Murray a couple of weeks ago. I was in San Diego at a mastermind, and he came and spoke to us about something that I had been exposed to before, but never in the way that he presented it. And I thought it was something that was so important, especially for people in self-storage, where it can really change the game for people. So I wanted to bring Joey in. He is the founder and principal of Wealth Without Wall Street. And we are going to spend a little bit of time talking about something that he has some serious mastery of. Wealth Without Wall Street has been around for 8 years, and he teaches people and coaches them on the concept of infinite banking. So Joey, first and foremost, thank you so much for coming and spending some time with me.
Oh, dude, it's a privilege. I'm grateful to be here.
So listen, as I said, I got to listen to your presentation. We were out at the Scott Myers Storage Mastermind out in San Diego. You had connected with Scott through another event, and he thought highly enough of you to bring you in. For those of you who aren't familiar with Scott's mastermind, you have to own self-storage to be a part of that mastermind. You don't get to show up unless you own some facilities. And so when Scott brings someone to speak to his mastermind, there's a little bit of gravitas that goes along with it. So Joey, I'm kind of saying that for some implied trust in what Joey has, but I want you to describe a little bit, because what you presented to us was this idea of infinite banking, of essentially becoming your own bank. So I'm going to let you explain it, because you're going to do a way better job than I am. But talk to me a little bit about this idea of infinite banking. And I also want you to tell us a little bit about how you got to it, how you even discovered this concept.
Well, the thing is those things go pretty much hand in hand. So grateful to share as much or as little as you need me to do today. But at the end of the day, if you think about the people in the world that you know who have the greatest acumen for either business and or like creating cash, like making money, it's the banks, right? At the end of the day, they have the greatest locations, the marble floors, they have like these beautiful facilities, and yet what do? They actually are just in between you and your money. Right? They set themselves between the depositor and the borrower. And you are probably in most cases both. You're putting money on deposit at a bank, and you're probably going to the same bank to borrow things for cars, for credit cards, for mortgages, whatever the case may be. And they make the squeeze on the inside, on the middle. Well, I read a book in 2009 that was called subsequently Become Your Own Banker by Nelson Nash. And it changed the way that I see the world, not just about money, but in terms of even like seeing my purpose in terms of stewarding the things and the resources that I have. And one of those being money, and saying, I need to take back control, because Thaddeus, I think you'd probably agree with me. Most Americans have been on this kind of this path where they were told that they're really not supposed to be the ones responsible for managing their own wealth. They needed a wealth manager for that. Somebody to like abdicate that responsibility to on Wall Street, and that they don't need to really think about it. They just need to keep their head down, work, and hopefully one day retire on this money that they've, squirreled away that someone else has been managing. And to be honest, man, there's nothing else in life that works that way. Nothing. You can't abdicate your marriage to somebody else, your parenting to somebody else, your even your education to somebody else. Like, it all comes down to the resources you're given by God. You need to be the one to steward those things well. And your money is so important. And so anyways, I can give you more like details about it. But once I read that book, it was like a light bulb. It's like, wait a minute. Yeah, I should be the one doing this. But that means I also have to educate myself, and I have to do things, in some cases, totally opposite of what I used to be doing that led me to this point.
So I'm going to dive into something that from your talk when we were out in San Diego that you mentioned, and you were actually working for the bank at the time when you read Nelson Nash's book, right? And it,
Yes, yes. Wells
what
Fargo.
what interested me so much, by the way, I cannot tell you in the last 5 to 10 years how many times I've lost brain cells dealing with Wells Fargo where I happen to bank. That's a whole nother conversation. We get really sidetracked. Um, you started looking at the way the banks invest their money.
That's
And
right.
so tell me a little bit about that road that you went down and where that led you.
Well, so it wouldn't be a shock. Like someone asks you right now, they'd say, where do you think banks put their money? Because they make money off of your money, right? Your money's on deposit. Your money gets lent out in terms of loans, and they make money in between. But what do they do with that? And the reality is, I would have guessed, and we were on a kind of a real estate related show here, real estate. And you'd be right, right? There's billions of dollars in assets on anybody's balance sheet. If you go to FDIC.gov, you can look it up. Wells Fargo at the time had something like $12 billion in real estate on the books. And I was like, okay, I'm not shocked by that. But then if you scroll down the same list of assets, there's probably down to like line 21 or something. I can't remember the exact line. It says cash value life insurance. And would you know that they had 18 billion in life insurance? And you say to yourself, wait a minute. These guys know a lot about money. Obviously, they create money out of thin air with our money, and they have to do something with it. And they choose to put more in cash value life insurance than they do in real estate. Like, what am I missing? Like, that should be the first question that you ask. And you pointed out in my talk in San Diego, when I learned this, I went around to the VPs, like the executive vice presidents, the regional vice presidents in the area that I work here in Birmingham, Alabama. And I just said, hey, I read this book, talks about taking back control of your finances, but he talks about using a very specially designed life insurance contract to store cash that then you can go leverage into real estate or into passive income assets. And what do you think about that? And, Thaddeus, there wasn't one person that had one of those high profile titles that said this was a good idea. They're like, oh, that's dumb. Why would anybody put money in cash value life insurance? And simultaneously, the bank that they work for is insuring their lives and pouring billions of dollars into cash value life insurance. Like, it was one of those moments. I don't know if you've ever had I think we even talked about this in San Diego. There are like light bulb moments where something goes off and you're like, I'm living in an upside down world right now. Like, the bank's telling me this is a bad idea and they're actually doing it at the same time. Like, I think I should stop
doing it. They're doing it at a massive level,
bigger than anybody else. So, and I was like, okay, I need to do as they do, not as they say. And so that's really what kind of started this whole process for me. Is I was like, okay, there's something to this. I'm going to go ahead and start my own process, my own funding of these type of policies. And that was 2010. Fast forward 4 years later, I got so fired up about the concept because it was making such a big difference for my family. I was like, more people need to know about this. And that's kind of when I broke away. I left my over $300,000 job in the mortgage business. And I said, man, I feel called to get this word out. And I went to my now business partner. It's like, Russ, we gotta do something at a bigger scale. Like, this is not going to work just for you and me to know this. Like, we need to let more people know. And that's kind of was the genesis of Wealth Without Wall Street. And we started down this path of just helping other people, coaching them on the same concept. And then that led to our podcast in 2017 and trying to figure out what to do with the cash. Like, once you have this capital in these policies designed for cash, you now need to tell it what to do. And, I'm sitting here talking to you and the folks here on your show, they all know what to do, right? It's self-storage, right? But I didn't have a clue. And so I was trying to figure that out. And Russ and I were interviewing gurus upon gurus to figure that out. And that led to our own, passive income journey, where we went from 2,500 a month that we reported in June of 2020 to over 50,000 a month just in about 2 years after that, because we got really fired up about how do we build passive income with this capital that we've now stored in these life insurance contracts.
So want to kind of dig in a little bit, because you and I obviously kind of understand what we're talking about. But for somebody just listening for the first time who hasn't been exposed to the idea of infinite banking, tell me how this process works. What am I doing to start? And by the way, for everyone out here, this is not an overnight deal. This is some discipline that's required, right? You mentioned it earlier. It was 4 years between 2010, when you first started this journey, and 2014, where you started to really kind of reap some rewards from it, where it was enough for you're like, hey, maybe I can go make something of this. So I don't want to, this is not a get rich quick scheme in any way, shape, or form, but take me through the steps a little bit of what this looks like for somebody.
Well, I'll tell you what we kind of learned, sometimes going the wrong way and then like looking backwards and saying, oh, maybe we should have done this a little bit faster or more efficiently or whatever. There's now even better ways than even the way we started, that our coaches 100% walk people through a process. That process we kind of summed up in our book that just came out a few months ago, and we call it the GPS model. Oh, look at this guy. He's got the book right there. Good job.
You're going to see a link down at the bottom of the screen where you can go. That's available on Amazon for anyone who wants it. You weren't lucky enough to be in San Diego and get one handed to you, digging into it and love it. As I told you when we were sitting at breakfast, this concept excites me for whatever reason. I have heard about it before, but anyway, before I sidetrack you too much.
Well, so just the 3 steps that we outline in the book is your GPS, right? Goal, plan, support. And everybody's familiar with GPS, right? They're familiar with the fact that I can pull up my Maps app and I can enter a destination, and it tells me, okay, where you're at right now to where you want to go. There's an efficient means to get there. Take this right, take this left, whatever. And it tells you how to get there as fast as possible. Well, when we outlined the steps in this, it was us looking backwards and saying, ooh, if I knew now, or if I knew then what I know now, this is what I would tell people. And in the goal phase, this is like when people wake up to this idea that I need to take control. I need financial freedom today, right? I want my passive income to exceed my monthly expenses. And why is that? It's because I want to pull up my calendar and I want to place things on my calendar proactively, not reactive to someone else putting those things on my calendar. Right? Now, many of you listening probably already have a lot of freedom when you own your own self-storage business, or you're out there, you're creating your own wealth by doing that. But maybe you're not. And if you're not, and you're like, yeah, I do want to take steps to where maybe in my calendar, I want to go meet with investors, and I want to go walk properties, and I want to do due diligence. And like, this is what excites me. And I'm stuck in this other 9 to 5, or this other business that's really not, it's like life sucking, not like life giving. Well, if you can get clear on what that goal is that you really want to have, either be, do, or have, that's your goal phase, then I can start to put a plan together with what to do with my cash. And I'll tell you that is, if you're not really fired up about this idea of financial freedom, like gaining control of your finances, like infinite banking is good, but it's not probably the best. But if you really want access to the capital, you're going to stop doing things like 401ks. You're going to stop putting money in a SEP IRA just because your accountant says that's the only way to save money on your taxes this year. Because when you do that, you're going against your goal. Right? If I put $25,000, $50,000 in my SEP IRA this year, that means that's $50,000 I can't access to gain freedom today. Well, they say, well, you're saving money on your taxes today. Well, that's great. But what is it costing me? Is it costing me until I'm age 60 before I can get access to that money again? How much does that cost you? Right? It's not about just the dollars and cents today. It's about, man, what is the freedom, the lifestyle that I'm giving up for some sort of a lower tax bill? And, so anyways, that's how you start to form this plan. And that's where IBC really falls in, is if I can start storing my cash there instead of in all these other places that don't get me to my goal, all of a sudden I have a lot more money to play with, and I start playing the game at a higher level. So that's kind of the 3 steps. Goal, plan is where IBC really takes root. And then support is where you're around other people, which is why I love being here with you, because we met at a mastermind, which, I mean, there is no better investment than coaching, mentors, and masterminds. And if you can put yourself in that sort of a support system, your goals become that much richer, faster. There's no question.
Agree wholeheartedly, which is why I was in San Diego as someone from New Jersey and spend a lot of time. People that follow me and follow the podcast, half my guests on the podcast are people I meet at masterminds first and foremost. The other half are people I see at trade shows. But definitely the best investment you could possibly make in yourself, because of mindset. You're putting yourself around people who, and maybe you experienced this, maybe not, but it took me a long time in life to find my people, because we're not taught to go to masterminds. Like, they don't give you Napoleon Hill when you're in high school. They don't teach you financially. They don't teach you to, hey, look what the Rockefellers did with their money when you're in high school, right? You learn about the Rockefellers from the industry side of it, but not from the financial management and the intelligence with money side of it.
That's right. And I think it's, it's a mindset shift that has to take place, that you start to think, man, again, it's kind of along the same lines. People say, I can't afford to be in that mastermind, or I can't afford coaching, or I can't afford fill in the blank. But then they don't think of the cost of what it means that they don't get, right? Yeah. The people in your immediate circle, if they're not talking about these things, like you're listening to this podcast for a reason, and there's things that you're learning that if the people in your circle are not celebrating this with you, are not like fired up with you, I'm not saying they have to be at your exact same level, but if they're not supportive and encouraging and like, man, you should run after fill in the blank that you learned about or whatever, you need a different circle. I mean, it's just facts, man. Like, you can't deny it. And so, man, find your people, whoever it may be. And it may be a self-storage specific mastermind, like where we met. It may be that you need somebody to help you coach on your own finances to get kind of that ground zero. I know a lot of people, and that's why we started offering that, right? But there's so many different paths. But if you don't have the circle, you have to create the circle. It exists. It's just not going to be default, where you're at when you're there all the time.
I think that's so fascinating what you just talked about. I'm going to take a second to kind of go down the road. One of my mentors, actually, Joe Evangelista, you all mentioned, who I worked for, and it got me into storage. So God bless him. Unbelievable. Helped me get to where I'm at in this circle that I absolutely love and adore. He said something one time about success, right? And used the analogy of crabs in a bucket. But if you put a bunch of crabs in a bucket and one crab is climbing up and making it to the top, the other crabs will actively pull them back down into the bucket, right? And so many times I think we find ourselves in a circle of people where it's crabs in a bucket. Like, they're not celebrating your success. They're not celebrating your wins. And quite frankly, don't always understand the pain and aggravation that you go through as an entrepreneur to get to that place of success, right? Because listen, if you're listening to this podcast and you're running your own business or even working towards that place, it's not an easy journey, right? Which is why I think your point is so well taken, that you almost have to surround yourself with those people that are actively searching for that little bit extra, that are paying money, right? There's that filter there of like, man, you know what you're getting, because those people are putting money out of their pocket to go search for self-improvement.
100%. Yeah. You guys now have a commitment to each other that doesn't exist in just your normal default circles. And again, I mean, there's very few people that are in that position. So the fact that you have to pay money to be in those circles is not uncommon. And man, it's an investment. Once you start to think, like what we've kind of started off saying is, you take control of your own finances. You don't abdicate that to somebody else like Wall Street. You now owe it to yourself to invest in yourself because you're the asset, right? In fact, one of the first things I say in the book is you are the number one asset in your life. And the thing is God's given you resources. He's given you experiences. He's given you all these things that now you are steward over, and your education and paying for education and paying for masterminds and coaches is critical to taking it to that next level. There's no doubt.
I love that word steward, right? And we talked about this in San Diego. You are a Christian man and really believe in that. I love the fact that you're super comfortable. Like, God gave you this, right? God gave you these opportunities, and are you willing? And I think a lot of it for people comes down to fear, right? Like, are you willing to take ownership of it? Are you willing to say, hey, this is on me? I'm not going to blame, go back to 2008. I'm not going to blame Wall Street. If I had my money in Wall Street and the market dropped by 50%, is it Wall Street's fault? Right? Or is it something I have to take ownership over? And I think that's something where I connected with you so strongly, because that's something that I in my late 40s, now 50 years old, have really strongly dove into, which is this idea of 100% accountability. It's nobody else's fault, right? It's on me.
Well, and here's the other thing that I think is keeping a lot of people from taking action is the fear of failure. And that is literally an indoctrination that I believe our school systems have really ingrained in us. I mean, if you think about it, if you don't get 100, right, that's the mark that our schools teach. But I don't know about you, I've interviewed over 500 people on our podcast, Wealth Without Wall Street.
I just checked.
Do what?
545 episodes. It's pretty impressive, actually.
Well, I mean, but you've done a ton as well. And if you think about it, if you've ever talked to somebody who's like uber successful, do they ever, would you even imagine somebody saying, you know what, I've never made a mistake. I've never lost money. I've never had conflict in the workplace. I've never.
Awesome story to illuminate your point. Mike and Alex Burnham, which is Safe Storage USA, the largest privately held owner of self-storage in the United States, $8 billion of assets under management. And they both talk about Mike's father, Alex's grandfather, who started the business, 37 businesses he started. One of them made money, right? 37 businesses. One made money. So your idea, like that point is so strong, right? This idea that you have to score 100 is so absurd, right? Because it's just not the reality of most successful stories in the United States. It's not even close to the reality.
No. And the fact is it's part of your education, right? If you think about those setbacks, those lessons learned, they make you stronger for the next one. They make you stronger for the next one. And I mean, I can't tell you, I love having a podcast because we do share the major losses. Like right now, I would tell you, don't buy an RV and try to rent it out to people and make money. It's not going to work. Like it doesn't cash flow. I can tell you, I'm upside down like 25 grand on this thing right now. I can tell you, don't do it. There's tons of things that we've lost money on. I've been involved in a Ponzi scheme. Like that doesn't feel good. I'm just going to go ahead and tell you, it sucks. Yeah. But guess what? How much better of an investor I am today than I was before that. It's dramatic. Like I know how to sniff things out and do due diligence better than I ever have. And I can just tell you the trajectory is far higher as a result of going through those things. So I just want to encourage you, as you're listening to us, like take chances, take informed and educated chances, and be ready to learn along the way, and know that it's a marathon. It's not a sprint, right? Your first deal is not going to be the most successful thing you've ever done. And it's not intended to be.
Oh, I would. We talked about this in San Diego. We had breakfast in San Diego, and I'll tell this story because it's pretty cool. I was sitting down by myself for breakfast. I had just finished. You were speaking about marathon. I'm running a marathon October 19th, so it's coming up quickly. I was doing a morning run that Thursday, and I was running late. I sat down to eat breakfast by myself, and Joey walks up and just sits down. He's like, "Hey, mind if I join you for breakfast?" Absolutely my kind of guy, and led to a conversation, which is why I invited him onto the podcast. I'm trying to remember why I just went down this road. This is the downside of being a 50-year-old ex-kickboxer. But moral of the story, you invited yourself to come and sit down with me just without – what were you talking about before you said this? Because I had something I wanted to go here, and I can't.
Well, just making mistakes along the way, right?
That's where I was going. So we were talking about breakfast. I'm in self-storage because I lost 6 figures flipping houses. I lost 6 figures. And I'm thankful every day for it, because if I hadn't taken that risk and I hadn't lost that money, I wouldn't be in this place that I literally thank God every day that I'm in this business. So supporting your point about, hey, listen, don't be as dumb as I was. And if you need some advice on what not to do flipping houses, call me and I'll share some with you. Just like Joey will share with you, don't try and lease out an RV. I can share my mistakes. But it's that point of like, hey, you fail forward, right? You're going to make mistakes, but at the end of the day, it's where do you end up?
100%. Yeah. And I can just see, talking about faith as well, like God directs your path, and it's not the way that you always think it should be, but it always is for your good, right? His glory, your good, those things are intertwined in everything that we do. And man, I hold the wealth and the things that he's given me with an open hand, because at the end of the day, it's not just my story being like talked about here, it's his. And so how do I learn from each one of those setbacks and become a better investor, a better father, a better husband, whatever the case may be on the other side of that? So man, I just get excited talking about this stuff, because I don't feel like there's enough people out there talking about this. And if it just gets people, off of start, right? If you've been stuck at start, this is the episode to say, golly, if this like redneck guy from Birmingham, Alabama can create $50,000 a month in passive income, I mean, what am I doing? Like, let's get after this thing.
Listen, I always keep this to a half hour to honor my guest time, but also so it's digestible for my audience. And we're fast approaching that 30-minute mark. I have a couple other things I want to talk about before we get there. We haven't dug super deep into what it actually means to do infinite banking, actually, the process. And obviously you went over it when we were out in San Diego. I want you to tell me a little bit about the power of life insurance policies and how someone should look at them versus how people typically are told to look at them.
100%. So I'll give you the very quick and dirty, because I want to be cognizant of your time as well. Most people think about life insurance, they think about it as, I want the highest death benefit with the lowest cost per month or per year. That's like your term policies, right? You have coverage for 10 years, for 20 years, whatever, a term of coverage. And then after that, you have nothing. Right. Well, in these type of policies, the way the banks do it and the way that we learned how to do it, and now we teach others and implement this for them, is you're going to maximize the amount of cash you can put into them, the premium as much as possible, and the death benefit as low as possible. And it's a backwards formula, but it actually maximizes the amount of cash that the policy grows with. Think of it as equity in a house. Okay. If you have a house that's worth $200,000 today, and then it's grown to $400,000 in the last 2 years, now you have $200,000 of equity in that property, right? Well, I can go to the bank and say, hey, I want to borrow, let's say $100,000 on a home equity line of credit against the equity in my house. And what do? They give you a loan. You go use that loan to invest in a self-storage deal with Thaddeus, right? He's got this awesome deal. You're like, I'm in. $100,000 from the home equity line into the self-storage deal. Now you've got your home could continue to grow with value. right? Or it could actually go backwards depending on the market, but you've got your money at work in the self-storage deal. Well, think of that's how infinite banking works. I've put money into the cash value of this life insurance policy. It's growing with an actual contractual guaranteed rate of interest and non-contractual guaranteed dividends. It's growing every single year, and it has to grow to equal your death benefit by age 100 or 121. So now I borrow against the equity the same way I would at the bank, but it's through the insurance company. Right. I borrow against that cash value. I go out, I do the same self-storage deal. Now I have money growing in self-storage, and I have the cash value of my policy continue to grow. I got two assets growing at the same time. That's why this concept is so powerful, is because there's nothing else that you can do like it with the guarantees, with tax deferment and tax-free access at all times, and being able to have the assets on the other side grow. So you want to get to financial freedom as fast as possible, you need the right vehicle, right? I can drive from Birmingham to San Diego on a bicycle, or I can get in a jet. Right. Which one do you think is going to get me there faster? Like, this is the jet, and we gotta maximize that. So, but the biggest thing that hangs people up is, how do I get started? Like, how do I know how much to do? What insurance company do I use? Like, who should be insured? Is it me? Is it my kids? Is it my wife? Whatever the case may be. And we literally have all of that built into our process, where our coaches walk you through exactly all those answers. Like, they've been asked them a million times. So they walk you through how to maximize it for your purposes.
You guys can see the website down at the bottom scrolling along that will get you directly to Joey's team, which I love. I could go on for an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours with you, because there's so many topics that I want to dig in with you. Hopefully sometime in the future, you'd be welcome to come back onto the show and will grace us with your time again. Somebody wants to connect with Joey Murray directly, dig in a little bit more. What's the easiest way to get a hold of you?
Well, I'll tell you, we set up a page specifically for this show, so that you can get access to, if you want to talk to a coach for free, be my guest. If you just want to have a connection point with me, if you want access to some of the other free giveaways that we have, go to wealthwithoutwallstreet.com/self-storage made simple. So wealthwithoutwallstreet.com/self-storage made simple. And love to hear that this is where you heard me and Thaddeus, our conversation, and I love to connect with like-minded people.
Man, so grateful that you were willing to just take that chance in San Diego and come and sit down with me, and looking forward to many more conversations like this. Just want to thank you again for the time, and more importantly, 8 years. And first of all, congratulate you on that. 8 years you've been running Wealth Without Wall Street, which, as any entrepreneur knows, is a phenomenal accomplishment in and of itself, going very, very strong. I mentioned earlier, 545 episodes of the podcast, over 1.5 million downloads of this guy's podcast. So I want to congratulate you just on the impact that you're making. And going back to what we were talking about your belief in God, talk about being a steward, not just for yourself, but then passing on to other people, something that I find to be incredibly important. So just want to say thank you for that. And thank you for spending some time with us doing it.
Man, it's always a privilege, and I'm grateful to have met you as well. And now we get to share audience. So this is super awesome.
Love it. Hey, listen, I'm Thaddeus Campbell. I'm the host of Self-Storage Made Simple. Want to thank Joey Murray, founder of Wealth Without Wall Street, for joining us. That is it for this week's episode. If you got anything of value whatsoever, please click the like button, subscribe to the channel so you get updates on future episodes of the podcast. Want to thank our sponsors, the good folks at PropRise. If you haven't checked out their search engine yet, unbelievable. If you are a developer in the self-storage space, it's something you absolutely need to have. So thanks to the guys at PropRise for sponsoring the podcast. We will see you guys next week.